When I was in middle school, I lived with my younger sister Callie, who was 3 at the time, and my mom in a tiny apartment in a bad part of town. My mom had left my dad when we were young, and she had become the sole provider for my family ever since. One of her cousins worked at the local McDonald's, which was not far from where we lived, so that was where my mom would drop me off until she got home from work and could pick us up. I was responsible for watching Callie during this time. While it might sound like kind of an annoying job to have, I didn't mind it at all. My mom's cousin would give both of us free food, and I could work on homework while Callie played in the indoor playground. One night my mom was running late to pick us up and it was getting dark out. The restaurant was pretty quiet with only a few customers here and there. 2 men walked in the door and looked around. They both grabbed sodas and then sat down at a table right next to mine. I remember thinking it was strange because there were plenty of other open tables. I minded my own business and continued doing my homework, looking up every few minutes to make sure Callie was okay on the playground. I could see her clearly from where I was sitting. Suddenly, one of the men sat down at my table. It startled me, making me gasp out loud. The man apologized for scaring me and then told me the reason he had come over was that he thought he knew my dad. I explained to him that I hadn't seen my dad in years and that he wasn't even in the state. This didn't seem to faze the man as he went on to ask me questions about school, sports, and what I did for fun. I was so confused about why he was asking me this and why he even cared. He then noticed a cross necklace I was wearing and began asking me questions about my religion and where I went to church. Several minutes had gone by and I realized I hadn't checked on Callie. The man was blocking my vision of the play area. I craned my neck to look past him and I couldn't see her anywhere. Was she hiding in the tube slide? Had she come back in the dining area when I wasn't watching? I began to go into panic mode. The man was still asking me questions, but I stood up and told him that I needed to find my sister. I sprinted to the play area, scanning the area for Callie, who was nowhere in sight. I then glanced out the window into the parking lot just in time to see the man who had come in with the guy who had sat down at my table. He was carrying Callie, kicking and screaming, into a nearby truck. I screamed for my cousin to call 911 and told him that Callie was being kidnapped. My cousin is a big guy who was in his 20s at the time. He told his coworker to call 911 and he ran out into the parking lot with me, followed by 2 of his other male coworkers. By this point, the man was struggling to get Callie into the vehicle. When he saw my cousin and his coworkers coming towards him, he panicked and left my sister on the parking lot ground before jumping in his vehicle and driving off. Luckily, my cousin was able to get a picture of the license plate. The police were able to locate him, but not the man he had come in with that was trying to distract me at the time so I wouldn't see what was going on. I can't believe how close I came to probably never seeing my little sister again. When I was in high school, I worked at the local McDonald's to make some extra money and save up for college. I usually would start my shift at around 3:30 p.m. and would finish up around 9 p.m. As much as McDonald's gets a bad rep, it really wasn't a bad job. I worked with other kids my age, and we all made the best of it. On one particular day, it was about an hour until the end of my shift, and I was anxious to go home. It had been a long day, and I had a pile of homework waiting for me. The restaurant was pretty empty, and I was sweeping the floor when a disheveled-looking older man walked in. I sat my broom down and headed back to the register so I could take his order. The man approached the counter and stood there for a strangely long time. He wasn't looking at the menu, but instead staring at me, a creepy look on his face. After some time went by, I began to get uncomfortable, so I cleared my throat and asked him if he was ready to order. He finally spoke up and asked for only a Coke. After I put the money he gave me in the register, I got him his drink. When I reached out to hand it to him, his fingers grazed my hand in a way that definitely seemed purposeful. I reached my hand back quickly and turned away to go back to tidying up behind the counter. But I could still feel the man watching me and realized he hadn't moved. He hadn't even taken a sip of his drink. He was just standing there, staring at me with a bizarre smile on his face. I did my best to pretend I didn't see him. He then spoke up again and asked me what my name was. I thought this was odd because I was wearing a name tag at the time that was visible. I told him my name anyway, but his questions didn't stop there. He continued to carry on a conversation with me, seemingly not aware that I was uncomfortable. He asked me personal questions like what area of town I was from and what grade I was in at school. I only gave him very vague answers, knowing that I needed to protect my own privacy. The man then asked me for my phone number. I was surprised he was so forward because he knew that I was clearly underage. I told him I didn't want to give it out, but he was persistent and wasn't letting the subject drop. Eventually, I switched places with one of my coworkers and went to work in the kitchen while he took care of the register. Around 30 minutes later, he told me the man had left, and I was really relieved. The shift went on without incident, and eventually it was time for me to leave. I clocked out, said goodbye to my coworkers, and headed out into the dark parking lot to my car. I was about to unlock my car when all of a sudden I heard a voice from behind me say, "Where do you think you're going?" I spun around and discovered the disheveled man from before standing right behind me. He reeked of alcohol and cigarettes and had a crazed look on his face. Before I could even process what was happening, he lunged at me, grabbing my arm with shocking strength. I let out the loudest scream that I could muster and then used my knee to strike him in the crotch. He yelled out in pain, releasing my arm just long enough for me to get into my car and lock the doors. The man began hitting my windows with his fists so hard that I was sure they would shatter. I put the keys into the ignition and began driving away, the man chasing me on foot for a short distance until he could no longer keep up. Luckily, surveillance video captured everything that went down and the police were able to find the man. From then on, one of my coworkers always walked with me to my car at the end of a shift. When I was young, McDonald's was putting these colorful plush toy animals in their Happy Meal boxes. I collected these toys at the time and was excited about the fact that I might be able to get one that they didn't have yet. The McDonald's was only a short walk from my house, so my parents let me go alone. When I got up to the register, there was a younger man I didn't recognize. He must have been a new employee. I ordered my Happy Meal and gave the man the money. He smiled at me as he took it, then leaned in to whisper something. He told me that he could go to the back and pick out any of the plush toys that I wanted. I was excited by this and told him that the one I especially wanted was the pink bunny. He nodded and went to the back to retrieve it. He was gone just a few moments and then came back and handed me the Happy Meal box. I thanked him and went on my way back home. That night, I was playing with the plush bunny and trying to find a place for it on my shelf where I kept my other toys. I was looking at the bunny closely when I noticed something strange about it. It was harder than my other plush animals, even though it was made by the same company and had the same tag as all my other ones had. It almost felt like someone had removed some of the stuffing and placed something hard inside. I continued fidgeting with it and noticed a small tear at the bottom of the bunny. It looked as if the tear had been repaired with some sort of glue. Intrigued, I felt like I had to know what was inside. I went into my desk and found a pair of scissors. I used them to pry open the tear. I then reached inside to feel around. I pulled out a tiny electronic device. I had no idea what it was, so I went downstairs and showed it to my dad. When I handed it to him, his eyes grew wide and he asked me where I had gotten it. I explained that I had found it inside my stuffed bunny that I got in my Happy Meal at lunch that day. My dad took the device and immediately called the police. It turned out that the device was a GPS tracker that the man at the restaurant had put inside so he would be able to find me. He was arrested that same day and linked to other creepy incidents involving children. My parents didn't let me go to McDonald's alone ever again after this incident.